Hello, and welcome everybody. Wow, it's been a long time since I've said that. It's great to be back with you all again for another Sectors Made Simple webinar. I was away last week on vacation, as many of you are aware, so we had a lovely webinar with my mom, Julie, in Spanish. But today we're back, and we're going to be starting a new I'm going to call it a series for the lack of a better term, but a theme that we're going to talk about today as well as at least through all of July, and we'll see how we're feeling from there. But we talked a lot about sectors. Well, we're named Sectors Made Simple. We look at market sectors, so it's only fair that we talk a decent bit about them. But something we haven't really talked about is subsectors and industries. Yes, there is a webinar in which I just mention subsectors and industries as this big overarching subject. But never have we actually gone through the list and talked about specific subsectors and industries of importance. So that's what I want to do with this series. Each week, we're going to take one subsector and put it under our microscope. We're going to look at it and talk about what companies are in it and how it's doing, of course. But we're going to go into a little bit of detail about how it works, what other sectors or industries it ties into, and go into a little bit of the economics behind it. Because after all, investing is a game of economics. Finding something that is good value because that value will go up over time, or so we hope. So in order to help us do that a little bit better, I wanted to highlight these subsectors so that we can take each one and cover its benefits and its drawbacks, understand its contribution in its parent sector, as well as show you that subsector and industry investing is not as difficult as you may think. So that is going to be the topic of today, as well as the next couple of webinars. We're going to be going into different subsectors each week. Today, we're going to be starting with one of my favorites, the semiconductor industry. So before we get into the presentation, I want to say hello to everybody we have with us live here. If you're watching this recorded, remember we do live webinars every single Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific time or Los Angeles time, 7 p.m. Eastern time, which is Florida, New York, and all of the other East Coast states. So if you're watching this recorded and you want to join us live, feel free to join us 4 p.m. on Fridays. But hello, Elizabeth, Danny, Chella, Andrew, Olga, Linda, Jorge, Kira, Eddie, Emelida, Andrew, happy birthday, JJBO, Yara, Nidia, Josefina, Consuelo Mabel, Sotero, Linda, Vero Jesus, Grisel, Kike, Rocio, my mom, Anna, Pat, Susanna, Romulo, Sarah, Rahi Good, and Yane and Maida. Great to see you all. So great to see you all again. It's a pleasure to be back, and I'm going to stop talking and start talking a little bit more about subsectors, aka, or in this case rather, semiconductors. So let's get straight into the presentation here, because I have a lot to cover about it. So, obvious disclaimer, we're going to talk about some financial stuff today. We're going to cover some economics, and all of this is my opinion. I do a lot of research to make sure that the information I give you is correct. Any sources of data that I provide are correct sources, and then I'm giving you the best and most up-to-date information I can, but I'm human, I make mistakes, and the people that make that information also make mistakes. So please don't take any of this as investment or financial advice. Always, before you make any investment decisions, consult a investment professional or a licensed financial planner or advisor. But let's talk about semiconductors. But first, let's go over what a semiconductor actually is, because it's a term that you've probably heard a decent bit about, but may not know what it actually is. So, semiconductors are a subsector or industry of the technology sector. And while semiconductors describe a large group of materials, integrated circuits, or as they're abbreviated, ICs, are by far the most common type of semiconductor. So, we have a bunch of different materials in the world. The obvious ones are things that are non-conductive: rubber, glass, things like that. Then on the other side, we have extremely conductive materials: metals, gold, aluminum, brass. All of those things are very conductive. So semiconductors are somewhere in the middle. They're semi-conductive. But in recent, it's become a term that's just used for processors and, like I said, ICs. Because these ICs are the building blocks of technology. A computer is an amazing thing, but it's made up of, I kid you not, billions of different little parts. So those parts have a name, and many of their names are integrated circuits. And they play an important part of any technology product, from laptops to cars to refrigerators, anything that has a screen, anything that does something for you with electricity. Anything that really uses electricity at this point will have a microprocessor or an integrated circuit as part of its process. So in 2018, the semiconductor industry had about $500 million in revenue. So it's big, but not the biggest. Because again, semiconductors are a small part of so many different industries. But it's just, again, a very small part of it. But when we look at the companies that actually are producers or heavy users of semiconductors, these little parts become big names, such as NVIDIA, ticker symbol NVDA, Broadcom, AVGO, Intel, INTC, Qualcomm, QCOM, Texas Instruments, if you've ever used a calculator, it's probably a TI, TXN, and then Advanced Micro Devices, or AMD. So a lot of these companies you may know directly, such as NVIDIA or Intel. Others you may not know as much about, but are in almost every single device you have. I have a new phone here. I also have an old phone here. The one thing these two phones have in common is that they both have microprocessors, and those microprocessors are made by Qualcomm. What's up? Oh, there was a question. Remind us about the advanced Google class registration. I definitely will. I will definitely make sure that I cover that. But Qualcomm is the chip producer for many of the smartphones that are around. In fact, the device you have, and because more than half of you watch these webinars on mobile, I'm willing to bet that the device you're using right now has a Qualcomm processor somewhere in it. So let's talk about what makes a semiconductor company a semiconductor company. Because these, again, we're grouping companies together here. So they have to have something in common. So let's just start with the bigger ethereal, kind of like non-standard stuff, in what's called Moore's Law. Moore's Law was named after Gordon Moore, who was one of the original co-founders of Intel in 1965. And he said at the time that every year, the number of transistors or the connections in a circuit would double. Every single year, it's going to double. That when you're going from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, or sorry, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, that's easy. Doubling when things are really small is very easy. Doubling when we're getting up into the millions or now billions is pretty wild. So he changed with the times a little bit, and in 1975 he revised his law to be once every 2 years the number of transistors or circuits would double. And while no means is this a real law, companies and semiconductor producers don't need to follow this, but they do. And like my mom said, some of this is probably going over some of your heads, and that's okay. But what I want you to know is that while we don't think about Moore's law, this is the reason why these companies do what they do. And I'll show you what I mean by that here in a little bit. But let's just show you the amount of growth we're talking about here. Back in 1970, devices had over 1,000 circuits. Today, the most common processors you'll use, like the one in your computer right now, has anywhere from about 10 to 50 billion. 50 billion. And the size of them are so small that in some of the processors that will be coming out this next year, the connections are smaller than our DNA. The thing that makes humans human and the thing that tells us how to be us is bigger than the connections that will be in our computer. It's crazy to think when we're able to build something smaller than what builds us. But let's get into why Moore's Law matters, instead of just throwing a bunch of huge numbers around. According to IC, Integrated Circuits Insights, amongst the 10 biggest semiconductor companies, 13% of the amount they generate from sales is spent on research and development, which is over 3 times more than the average for S&P 500 companies. So these companies are investing more into research and development than healthcare companies. They invest the most out of any subsector in the market in research and development. Because it's never are we okay with what we have today. What they're building today, we won't even see until 2 years from now. So research, development, and advancement in this space is so important. Moore's Law is not a rule, but it has become the standard that every single semiconductor company tries to live up to. Because from computers to cameras to phones to computer storage, the race is always on to make things bigger capacity, faster, and smaller. For the longest time, who remembers back in the day a floppy disk? Floppy disks were big. They're pretty big CD-sized things. This right here is over 30,000 floppy disks. Just this one tiny little thing. And this was from 2018. Today, you can get even bigger and better. Because research and development is so important to the semiconductor industry, it's its biggest benefit, but also its biggest challenge. Because everything in the semiconductor industry relies on timelines. They set timelines because they're developing today, not for tomorrow, but for 2023. So anything that goes wrong in our supply chain, in this semiconductor industry, any one thing going wrong doesn't just ruin what they're producing for this month. It ruins the next 2 years. And there's a term for this. It's called the Bullwhip Effect. The Bullwhip Effect is something in economics and in supply chain, which is how things get from one place to another, where a small change causes bigger and bigger and bigger effects as it goes further and further and further down. Let's think about it like this. Let's use the example of a freeway. Everyone's going along 65 miles an hour. Everyone's pretty happy. All of a sudden, some person in the right lane doesn't look, goes and makes a left-hand turn. The people behind him slam on their brakes, honk on their horns, maybe roll down the window and scream at them. I would never do that. But some people might. But now, that one small change creates a traffic jam. Here is a great example where the red cars are turning. And as a result of those cars turning, 2 cars cause dozens, if not hundreds of cars to back up behind them. The exact same thing will happen with supply chain. One factory. Let's give this example. We have a bunch of different factories to make a burger. We have bun, meat, and cheese. I make the buns. So I send my buns to Kira. Kira has the meat. My mom, Julie, has the cheese. So Julie sends Kira the cheese. I send Kira the buns. And then Kira can make the burgers and sell them. What happens if I can't make buns? What happens if I burn a batch? Now, all of a sudden, Kira doesn't have any buns to make burgers. Now, she has a bunch of burgers that just went bad. So she lost a lot of money because she couldn't make burgers because I didn't have any buns. So now, she's upset. She's trying to get a hold of Julie. Julie, stop sending me cheese. I can't take any cheese because my burgers just went bad. You see how one little thing of me not having flour, for example, can create such a massive problem. Not just for me, but for everyone else stuck in my traffic jam. And yes, this example here assumes that someone is a little not thinking and does something dumb. But things happen. You know, pandemics happen. Ships get stuck in the middle of the Suez Canal. There's a lot of different things that are not just someone messing up that can have the same effect. So let's look at what's happened with the semiconductor industry. Because as we've discussed before, the semiconductor subsector has to plan well in advance, literally 2 years in advance, to figure out how many chips they'll make. Because they're not perfect, and they don't want to do everything. So let's say NVIDIA. NVIDIA may not make their own microprocessors. What they will do is they will go out and they will say, hey, Taiwan semiconductor manufacturers, we need 1,000 microchips next year. So they will outsource. They will go out and have people build those chips for them, and then they just put all the pieces together. This process is called outsourcing, hiring someone else to do the job that you can't do or don't want to do yourself. That's great when you don't feel like cooking dinner and you just want to go grab a bite from In-N-Out. But when you're relying on another company for something like microprocessors, that is expensive to manufacture, time-consuming, and very, very volatile, one tiny little thing can destroy everything. And as a result of this, the semiconductor subsector is highly cyclical, which means that it's not very stable. It's going to have greats and horrible lows. There is very little room in between. It's volatile, it's cyclical, and there's a lot of profit to be made when you're making profit, but there's also a lot of risk. Because remember, a lot of things use semiconductors, but if the demand for chips is low, because they're not trying to figure out how many chips am I going to need next month. No. They planned for 2021 back in 2019. In 2019, I don't think anyone knew what was going to happen in 2020. So if they mess up, there might be too many chips and the demand is low, which means that the semiconductor manufacturers can't sell stuff. When the demand is too high, we will see semiconductor companies running out of chips because the demand far outpaces the supply. So, I ask you, where are we today? Where is the semiconductor industry today? Well, I'm going to summarize it in 3 words. Perfect worst storm. We are currently in, I have to use the word perfect because I can't think of a worse situation for the semiconductor industry to be in. It is perfectly horrible because COVID happened, and as a result, factories had to shut down, manufacturing had to stop, transportation had to slow down. We're not making semiconductors in a big, barn. We're talking operating room level sanitary. No viruses, no bacteria, nothing can be there. Everything needs to be spotless. So of course, when there's a global health crisis, that becomes impossible. So a lot of factories didn't just shut down for a couple of weeks until everything blew over. They shut down for months. And as a result, these shutdowns led to a huge shortage in chips. Then we had lockdowns. And these lockdowns required a lot of people to start working from home. Temporarily, or for many, permanently working from home. So what happens when you start working from home is you realize, my computer can't work from home. The computer that Kira was originally editing all of these videos on couldn't do it. So we had to get her a new computer. But getting parts wasn't easy. Because much like Kira, many people, not just in the US, but around the world, had to start buying or building computers to work from home. Or they started needing to buy other things to have at home. So this decreased supply and highly increased demand caused a massive spike in price of semiconductors and related products. And it's not just computing components. Because so many semiconductors are used in so many different industries, we saw other things, not just technology, get hit. And it was so bad that in February, President Biden signed an executive order to the tune of a couple $1 billion that would look over how the semiconductor industry is working, look at us outsourcing to companies in Taiwan or in India to manufacture our semiconductors, and try and bring those back into the US so that we can have a little bit more control over that supply chain. Now, let's just briefly cover some of the companies that have been affected by this, because some of them may be obvious and then others may not be. So the first two are General Motors and Ford, two auto manufacturers. What? Well, General Motors and Ford both make cars. And you want to know what's in cars? Radios, navigation. All of that requires semiconductors. All of that requires ICs. But you want to know what we weren't doing, because many of us were working from home? We weren't driving. We weren't commuting to work. We weren't buying new cars, because who's going to buy a new car when you can't even go and drive it? So car manufacturers got hit with this right up front. They got hit hard because they had all the cars, but no one wanted to buy them. Soon, people started getting back to normal. People started buying cars again, but they're not manufacturing them, because why would they make cars when they can't even sell the old ones? Then we have Microsoft, Sony, and Apple. These three manufacture some things that we will be familiar with: Xbox, PlayStation, iPhones. Samsung's not here, but Samsung Galaxy devices. All of these require top-of-the-line, cutting-edge microprocessors. And their supply didn't really go up. It kind of just stayed flat or went down a little bit. But when people are working from home more, they're also going to want to play more video games. They're going to want to get a new phone. They're going to want to do things that they can do from home. So they're going to invest in technology. But what happens when they can't buy it? The last two that I want to mention are AMD, Advanced Microsystems, and the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSM. TSM is on this list because they are one of the largest, if not the largest, third-party provider of semiconductors. They manufacture semiconductors that go into everything. Some companies manufacture their own semiconductors, NVIDIA for one. But TSM manufacturers, they don't create end products. They just create the semiconductors and then sell them to other companies. So all of these companies got hit, some for better, some for worse. But the one thing that's in common across all of them is that their supply either stayed the same or went down. Meanwhile, demand went way up. But we've talked a little bit about economics. Now let's talk a little bit about investing. How does all of this affect stock prices? Because the answer may surprise you. Tune in next week for the answer. I'm totally kidding. While there's no debate that chip shortages have affected these companies, the effect of the stock prices isn't what you may think. Because, yes, shortages mean less supply. Less supply means you can't make as much or you can't sell as much. But that doesn't mean less demand. Demand for semiconductors and related products has only gone up, despite the shortages that have resulted in a huge surge in price. Because many companies are still trying to create things. Yes, Ford and GM got hit hard because people weren't driving cars. But people were buying computers, and they were buying a lot more computers. People were buying a lot more tablets. So, as a result, many of these companies continued to generate massive sales numbers because they were completely selling out. They tried to figure out how much they would need to sell. And they sold that like 5 months ago. Now they're trying to figure out, well, what do we do now? So, in summary, stock prices through the shortage have been, on average, volatile, extremely volatile, but not negative. In fact, let's go and look really quick at TSM's stock price. That is TSM's stock price in the past year. In the past 6 months. We see it started off in decent shape, went up, got hit pretty hard when the whole Ever Given situation happened because it had some ships that got stuck. And ever since then, it has been up and down, but overall, pretty flat. Many of these semiconductor companies will have similar charts where they'll have their ups and downs. But overall, they're not going anywhere. Because, yes, in the short term, it's bad. But in the long term, they're still selling products. Yes, the demand is outpacing the supply, but companies don't go under because they can't meet the demand. Companies go under because there's no demand to meet the supply. So companies right now, semiconductor companies, they're hanging out. They're doing just fine. They're not flying through the roof because they can't meet the demand. If they could meet the demand, these stocks would be the hottest things on the charts. Tesla, eat your heart out. These companies would be flying. But they can't. We can't. Because they can't buy any more than what's been produced. And they can't produce fast enough. Remember, we're talking 2 years here from I have this idea to I have this product. So in the beginning of 2020, no one knew what was going to happen in 2020. So a lot of these companies didn't really have a chance to try and recover until they were already hit. So that's how it affects stock prices. It really doesn't. Things are pretty flat. But let's now talk about us. Let's talk about the people. Because while the companies don't really suffer, we do. Because we need to buy those semiconductors. And I'll tell you what, my demand for semiconductors has not gone down. It has only really gone up. And I'm assuming yours has too. Here's a list of just some of the easiest things to think about in terms of what has been affected. Smartphones, tablets, cars, computer components, actual computers, laptops. Anything that uses semiconductors, there's less of. So, it's not like when they run out, they can just make more. When they run out, they're just out. Like earlier this year, Ford stopped manufacturing F-150 trucks. They didn't slow it. They just stopped completely. So then let's look at one of the more obvious places. Electronics. Everyone wanted their new Xbox or their PS5 for Christmas, and Santa ran out of stock. And by Santa, I mean like everywhere. Best Buy, GameStop, Target, even Costco, completely sold out. Not because they messed up, but because no one could have expected what happened. And some of the prices to buy or build new computers, we're not talking 20% markups here. We're talking over double the price. Let me show you a few examples. Before I do though, Jose is saying, this is what's happening right now in the construction industry with windows. We can't finish the new houses because there's no windows. Definitely. This is something we're seeing all over, because the bullwhip effect is not semiconductors. The bullwhip effect is everything. Any industry that relies on lumber, brass, piping, PVC, windows, it's all of a sudden going to be impossible. Because you can't build a building without windows. So, yes, you're missing one part, but that one part stops you from saying the house is complete. It stops you from installing the thing that prevents weather. It's insane how many things can be messed up by one teeny little problem. But let me show you, because I went in today and I tried to find some of this to show you examples of this massive change in price. You want to buy a PS5? Good luck. Sold out. Digital copy? Sold out. CD version? Sold out. Wireless controller? Also sold out. Why? It also has a microprocessor in it. Now, let's look at these prices really quickly, all right? $500, $400, $570. Because, yes, Walmart is out of stock. This is Walmart's website. But Sisada is saying, yes, I need one for an Xbox. Well, guess what? eBay's got your back, but you're going to pay a little bit more. And by a little bit more, I mean over double. You know that version of the PS5? You know, that this one right here, the $500 one? Yep, there it is. $1,100. $1,100. Here's the deal. $900. You want it already used? $750. We're talking over 200% markup on price here. Now, how about computer components? Because I'm a huge advocate of don't buy a computer, build a computer. One of the most important things you need is a graphics card. It is what makes you see my face on your screen. So it's like a stomach. You can't build a person without a stomach. That stomach is going to cost you $1,500 if you want to buy it new. But you're not buying it right now. You're not buying it for $1,500, that is. You're buying it for $2,650, $2,275, $2,875. And yes, this is the top of the line, best graphics card you can find. But it's every graphics card. It's every computer processor. You want this processor right here? This AMD processor? Hey, AMD, Advanced Micro Devices, right here. Correct price, MSRP price, $495. What are you going to pay? $720. How about all of the people that took my mom's tablet classes? All of you have those tablets. These guys. You know those tablets that you got with your classes? What if I told you that the value of those tablets is now double? Because you can't buy them anymore. You can't buy anything anymore. Everything, literally everything that has a processor in it. Phones. More phones. The cat doesn't have a microprocessor. Well, actually, the cat does have a microprocessor in it. Sorry, Cleo. Time to go on eBay. No, but actually, everything, literally everything has microprocessors. And there's no microprocessors, so everything's more expensive. Just like that. So, congratulations if you have a tablet. Congratulations if you built a new PC. Because you can't do that anymore. They're so expensive that you're not buying it from Best Buy, from GameStop. You're buying it from Juan de los Palotes and Juanita de las Flores that's ripping you off on eBay. That's just how it is. So, if you've noticed, I've spent way too much time looking at technology stuff, and the prices of everything is insane. But, let's go back to the investing. Because, again, I want to show you how these industries affect you personally, but also as an investor. Jose, I see your question. Let me finish up the presentation. There's 2 slides left, and then I'll make sure I answer your question. So, I just shared with you how this affects you as a consumer and as a human. But let me show you now as an investor how you can take advantage of the semiconductor industry. Because yes, it has its highs and its lows, but it's still a very strong sector that has historically performed very well. We expect microprocessors to follow Moore's law. Every 2 years, their performance will double. And his law from 1970s still holds true almost 60 years later. That's pretty impressive. So let's talk about how to track the semiconductor industry and how to invest in it. So the easiest way to track it is by the NASDAQ index for semiconductors, SOX, S-O-X. This is maintained by a group called PHLX, and it is, just like many of the indexes we look at, capitalization weighted, and looks at the 30 largest semiconductor companies. But you can't buy that. That's the index. That's like looking at the S&P 500. For ETFs, we do also have some options. There are different ETFs that will offer access to the semiconductor sector, or subsector as it is. iShares offering is SOX, S-O-X-X. Van Eck has SMH, and good old State Street Spider has XSD. But that's not all. If you are particularly risky and you want to find the volatility of the volatility, you can go and there are leveraged and inverse leveraged ETFs, such as the Direction 3 times leveraged, SOXL. So on average, every percent semiconductors go up by 1%. On average, this will go up by 3%. But if it goes down by 1%, it will go down by 3%. Then there is the Direction 3 times inverse. That means if it goes up by 1%, this on average will go down by 3%. So it goes in the opposite direction. And the last way we can do it is we can find companies in the semiconductor industry. And we can do that using FinViz, where we compare the performance of semiconductors against other industries. Or we can compare semiconductors against all other industries. So we can look just in technology or at everything, as well as we can use our FinViz screener to find companies within the semiconductors industry. Now, don't take my word for it. We'll go and look at all of this together. But before we do, I want to answer some questions that I've seen. Jose was asking, what about new cars? So what's happened with new cars is that the demand for cars has gone down quite a bit because people started working from home and they couldn't drive even if they wanted to. So a lot of the major car manufacturers like Ford and GM, they had too many cars that they couldn't sell. So what they've started to do is stop manufacturing some cars like the F-150s, the Ford pickup trucks. Because what they're trying to do is right now the supply is up here and the demand is down here. And in that gap right there is where all the lost money is. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to drop the supply in the hopes that the demand slowly rises and then they can meet it halfway. Can they produce more cars today? Kind of. They can only produce as much as they have semiconductors for, as much as they have parts for. But they probably have more parts than cars they're making. But they're likely, and this is purely speculation. I'm totally just trying to, this is not based in any sort of, I read a study that, no. They're likely trying to lower the supply so that they can sell off all of those old cars and then be able to eventually start producing them again. Can they make cars? Yes. Will they make cars? Not right now, because they're trying to make it balance out. I've gotten quite a few questions about the Excel classes, so let me go through those really quickly. So a couple of questions that I've seen. I'll just start from the beginning. You can find on our YouTube channel a playlist called Spreadsheets Made Simpler Basic. In those classes, I teach you how to use spreadsheet programs, but mainly focusing on Google Sheets as a resource for investing, but more generally sharing information to help you use spreadsheets a little bit simpler. Because spreadsheets are an amazing program that can be used for everything, from tracking your spending and your budgets, to tracking how much money your company makes or loses, to doing financial watch lists, to doing full data imports and analysis. It is a tool that professionals can use just as students can use. And it's a skill set that I really want to see more people have. So you can go onto our YouTube channel and you can find over 6 hours of webinars to teach you the basics of Google Sheets. From there, we are going to be starting in a week and a half on Monday, July 12th. I will be starting a class series called Spreadsheets Made Simpler Advanced. This class series is going to be a 12-week long course. So 12 weeks, one episode every Monday at 4 p.m. Los Angeles, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And the classes, yes, they cost $400, and that will include access to all of the live classes, all of the homeworks that you'll have, as well as we will be working on an end product. We're going to work up to something. And that something is the Spreadsheets Made Simpler, or rather, the Be a Profit watch list. So what you will end up creating is this spreadsheet that you can give it any company you want to see. Let's do TSM. And it will automatically grab and import everything for Be a Profit so that you can create watch lists for companies and have it all set up with Be a Profit automatically. This seems like a lot, but the best part about it is that every class you will learn a new thing, and we will add that new thing to this spreadsheet. If you missed last week, don't worry, I will have checkpoints. If you missed last week, I promise you, you can go on, you can grab the checkpoint for that class and continue with us, and then go back and watch the other one when you can. So you will have homeworks, you'll have checklists, and you will leave the class with this. And you've built it yourself. And after the classes are over, you will have access to those videos still. So once the classes are done, if you want to go back and watch them again, or if you want to see the homeworks again, or see me explain the answers to the homeworks, all of the videos will be recorded and you will have access to those. Can I take the classes on my iPad? Yes. Google Sheets is an app that is available on your iPad as well as your mobile phone. Even my phone could do it. So you can take the classes on whatever device you have, although I will recommend a computer so that you can watch the video and follow along and do the exercises with me. How long can we keep the class in the link? So once you've purchased the classes, which again is $400 for the 12 class series, you will have those videos forever. So Kira posted the link for the classes. The registrations for those end on the 9th of July. So 1 week from today is when those class series registration ends. So if you're interested, the link is in the chat. Go sign up today because seats are limited. We're only going to have a certain number of people because I will be creating a new email, and that email is aligned to me. That is an email I will be looking at, so you can ask me any spreadsheets questions you have to that email. So because of that, I can only have the classes be so big because I only have so many hours in the day. What basic knowledge should the student have before the class? All you need to know is the information in the free videos we already have. If you know absolutely nothing about spreadsheets, awesome. Go watch the basic series. It's all free. It's all on our YouTube. The first lesson of this advanced class is going to pick up where we left off. So it'll be almost like a continuation if you are watching them all in order. Danny is asking, how is the SMS app going? How is the traffic? I don't have analytics for that. So I don't know how many people are using the app, but all I know is the app is there. It's available on Android and iOS. It does require a subscription though. So you have to be a Sectors Made Simple subscriber in order to use the app, because the app is the matrix. So anyway, if you have any questions about the webinars, if you want the link, or if you need any more info, please send us an email at support@sectorsmadesimple.com. We can answer your questions there, because for today, I want to finish showing you all about what we can do on FinViz with our subsectors. So this is FinViz. We've all been here before. If you click here on Screener, there is an option for Industry. And under Industry, we can scroll down and we can find Semiconductors right there. Semiconductor and Semiconductor Equipment and Materials. But Semiconductors is the main one. So clicking on that we get a list of 65 total companies. And these companies are manufacturers of semiconductors. They are not users of them, because if it was users of semiconductors, every single company on this list would be it. But these are the ones that produce our semiconductors. So here is our AMD, and I bet you if we go towards the end, there's our Qualcomm, and there's our TSM. Let's see, is NVIDIA in this list? That's a toss-up. NVIDIA's right there. Ta-da! So, that is how you can look for companies within the specific industry. You just go to FinViz, and you can find industry and choose semiconductors. Now, this is again only part one of a multi-class or a multi-webinar series of different subsectors. So what we can also do is we can go here to groups and click where it says group sector, and we can choose industries, but we just want to see the industries for technology. So here we see all of the different technology industries and subsectors. We have semiconductors right here, but we also have software, infrastructure, consumer electronics, so on and so forth. So here we can compare the performance of all of these different subsectors. So we can find which ones are performing the best over time. Lastly, if we click on just industry, I'll go back to the bar chart. We can click on just industry and get a list of every single subsector so that we get all of that info. Because the opportunity may be in technology, if technology is a leading sector, but we can also give ourselves more options of all of the different choices that we have here. So that is how you can compare them all. Someone was asking for the Spreadsheets Made Simpler playlist on YouTube. Here is that playlist for you. So if you click on that, it should take you over to, or did it not work? I got it. Okay, Kira's going to post the correct link. This is what happens when I try and multitask while doing a webinar. I send the wrong links. But anyway, let's again review just the core of what we're talking about here. Semiconductors right now are a hot industry, not because it's the best industry, but because it's an industry that's having a massive shortage. And that shortage is affecting everything from cars to tablets to mobile devices to computers. We're going to talk a lot about different industries, and part of that is finding where the bull market is. And we can use FinViz for that. We can go to the screener and choose an industry. We can also compare industries within a single sector by going to groups and then clicking on industry for the sector we want to see. Or we can click on industry and get them all. And then the last thing I want to show you is on etfdb.com, where we can go here and we can look up SOX, which will give us all, which is one of the key semiconductor ETFs. So if you want to get into the semiconductor market, but you don't know where to start, or you like just investing in ETFs, SOX and other choices within the semiconductor industry are a great place to start. So let me see if I can find, I wish that I knew actually how to get to it from here, but if you just Google semiconductor ETFs, it will give you a list of the different choices. So this link will be in the resources if you're watching it later, but if you're watching it right now, I will also post it in the chat. So go out, explore the magical world of semiconductors, and then thank everything around you that you have semiconductors available to you in mobile devices, because it is an incredible area of growth. The semiconductor industry grows not monetarily, but grows development wise faster than most other industries. Not because they can, but because they have to. They need to stay competitive because our demands for technology is only going up. So, the semiconductor manufacturers need to be ready to meet us there. Thank you all so much for joining today's webinar. I hope everyone enjoyed the new kind of spin and the new conversation that we're going to be starting, where next week we will have another subsector to look at. Members, I hope to see you all for our members webinar this upcoming Tuesday, where I will be talking about how to take a trading strategy and make it your own. So you can take a strategy that I use or that Kira uses or Nate uses and start to make it your own strategy to learn how you best invest and how you can do all of that very, very simply. Thank you all so much for joining us today. If you ever have any questions, please feel free to send us an email at support@sectorsmadesimple.com. Hope to see many of you in our Google Sheets and Spreadsheets Made Simpler webinar series. But for everyone else, I hope to see you all very, very soon. Take care, stay safe, have a great 4th of July, and we'll see you all next week.